We thought she had no family. That was what the nurse whispered, with her hand wrapped around mine, while my grandmother sat 3 feet away by a bright window no one had bothered to open. 3 weeks ago, I drove 9 hours unannounced to the 5-star nursing home my mother promised was the best money could buy. I found Grandma alone, unwashed, in a paper gown, beside the dead gardenia she had kept alive for 30 years. And while that room smelled like neglect, my mother and my sister were online, smiling beside blue water, spending the pension that was supposed to keep her safe. My name is Hazel. I'm 43, a florist, the daughter they never took seriously. I photographed the window, the gown, the plant, the room number. They had no idea the lie written into her file was about to make all 5 of those stars disappear. I'm going to tell you what that nurse said after those first 6 words, and what was typed into my grandmother's file, and exactly how 5 stars come down off a building. Let me take you back 3 weeks, to a porch in Atlanta and a bouquet that came home unopened. The box was sitting on the shop steps when I unlocked the door, and the brown paper had gone soft at one corner where the morning dew had reached it. I knew the wrapping before I read the label. I'd tied it myself. White gardenias, a sprig of rosemary, the wide satin ribbon I saved for the arrangements that actually matter. The little card was still tucked under the bow in my own handwriting. Happy birthday, Grandma. The delivery driver stood there with his clipboard and wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Idris wouldn't take it," he said. "What does that mean? Wouldn't take it?" He turned the box so I could see the sticker the facility had slapped over my shipping label. I read it twice because the first time my brain refused it. Returned to sender. No responsible party on file. I called the front desk, right there on the step. The line rang and rolled over to a recording about visiting hours and how much they valued their guests. I stood holding flowers I had grown for a woman that a building 3 states away had just decided belonged to no one. The ribbon was still cinched tight. Nobody had even bothered to pull the bow. My hands still smelled like cut stems an hour later, that green, bruised smell that never fully washes out. And it put me right back in my grandmother's backyard. Ruth taught me flowers before I could spell my own name. She'd press my small fingers down into the dirt and show me how to read a plant's thirst from the color leaving a leaf. My family turned all of that into a punchline. "When are you going to get a real job, Hazel?" my mother would say at dinner, and someone would laugh on cue. "It's not a career, sweetheart. It's a hobby." My sister Whitney was the one they bragged about. Whitney with the marketing title, Whitney with the lake house before the divorce, Whitney who returned a call within the hour, if there was something in it for her. I was the soft one, the one who played with flowers. Somewhere along the way, I stopped arguing about it, but Ruth never laughed. She'd take my muddy hand in both of hers and say it like she was reading a fact off the air. You notice when something's dying. That's a gift. Noticing what's dying, that was the gift. The gardenia in her room, the dead one I'd find on the windowsill, I'm the one who gave her that plant. I took a cutting off my grandfather's bush the spring after he died and rooted it in a jelly jar on my kitchen sill. She kept it alive for 30 years, through 2 moves and 1 hurricane, feeding it rainwater, talking to it like a person. The last birthday, she still knew my face. She told me it had bloomed in January, out of season, and that she'd stood at the counter and cried. "Your grandfather's flower," she said, showing off. I should have heard something in how thin her voice had gone that year. I told myself it was a bad connection. 3 weeks before that bouquet came home, I'd started calling her and getting nothing. Ruth's phone rang out. The facility's main line put me on hold and forgot I existed. So I texted my mother, "Is Grandma okay?" "She's not answering." The reply came back fast and smooth. She's in the best place, hun. Stop worrying. I wrote one word back. Okay. Then I sat in my dark kitchen with the phone face up on the table, the little gray delivered sitting under my message, and I watched it until the screen went black. The car keys were on the hook by the door. They were cold when I closed my hand around them. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I drove south to prove myself wrong. I didn't. I-75 South is 9 hours of flat pine and billboards for personal injury lawyers, and I drove it with the radio off. I'd left before dawn. Somewhere past Valdosta, the dread set in for real. Not a thought, a physical thing, a hand closing slowly under my ribs that pulled tighter the closer the exit numbers got. I stopped twice for gas and didn't eat. I kept hearing my mother, "Stop worrying, she's in the best place." By the time I pulled into the visitor lot, it was afternoon, and the building looked exactly like the website. Pale stucco, royal palms, a brass sign in a serif font that cost money. The fountain in the lobby of Camellia Reserve made a soft, expensive sound, and the air smelled like manufactured lemongrass, the kind they pump through a vent so you stop smelling everything else. There were orchids on the reception desk, a chandelier the size of a car, a wall of smiling staff photos under gold letters that said 5-star senior living. My legs were numb from 9 hours of interstate, and the light off all that marble made me squint. A young woman behind the desk beamed at me. "Welcome to Camellia Reserve. Are you here for a tour?" "I'm here to see Ruth Calloway." "Room? I don't know the room. She's my grandmother." She typed. The smile held, then thinned at the edges. She scrolled. She typed again. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I don't see a family contact on this resident." She turned the monitor a few degrees toward herself, away from me. "Our records list no family for that resident." I didn't argue with her. I'd find out later that arguing was exactly what they were built to absorb. And I'd find out, later still, that the empty family contact line wasn't an oversight. It had been wiped so no one would come, while my Uncle Roy stayed on as the billing contact, the only name the checks needed. I just read the little laminated map on the desk, found the residential wing, and started walking while she called something after me about signing in. Past the double doors, the carpet changed. The lemongrass faded. The hallway went quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. Quiet like a place where no one expects to be checked on. Room 210, room 212, a cart of folded paper gowns. Room 214. The door was open a few inches. I pushed it. She was sitting in a vinyl chair turned to face the window, and the first thing I saw was the back of her head. Her hair, which she had worn set and soft her whole life, matted flat on one side and greasy at the roots. She had on a paper gown, the disposable kind, tied loose at the neck so her shoulder blade showed. The blinds were up. The sun was pouring across her, and she wasn't in it. She'd been angled just to the side of the warm patch on the floor, like furniture moved and forgotten. On the windowsill sat the gardenia. 30 years of her keeping it alive, and it was black. Dry black, leaves curled to paper, the soil pulled away from the sides of the pot in a cracked ring. Dead the way a thing only goes dead, when no one has touched it in a very long time. There was a call button clipped to the bed rail, out of her reach, the cord looped up and over so it dangled against the wall, where she couldn't have found it if she tried. A lunch tray sat on the rolling table by the door, untouched. A skin formed over the soup. The television was off. There was nothing in that room that belonged to her. No photographs, no Afghan, none of the 1,000 small, soft things a person collects in 88 years. Just the chair, the bed, the cold tray, and the dead plant. The air conditioning came on and pushed cold across the back of my neck, and the room seemed to tip and slow. "Grandma?" Nothing. Grandma, it's me. She turned her head, her eyes found my face and moved over it, patient and polite and completely empty, the way you'd look at a stranger who'd knocked on the wrong door. I had to put my hand flat on the doorframe. For a second, I couldn't make any more words come. Footsteps behind me, fast, then stopping short. I turned. A nurse stood in the doorway with a little paper cup of pills in her hand, staring at me like I was a thing that wasn't supposed to be in the picture. "Are you—" she started. "Are you family?" "I'm her granddaughter." Something crossed the nurse's face that I would spend the next 3 weeks taking apart. She set the pill cup down on the dresser. She crossed the room and took my hand in both of hers, and her hands were warm and they were shaking, and she dropped her voice to almost nothing. "We thought she had no family," she whispered. "It's in her chart. No family, we were told." Behind her, my grandmother spoke for the first time in a thin, clear, terrible voice, looking right at me now like the fog had peeled back 1 inch. "They told me," she said, "you stopped loving me." I didn't cry in that room. I would later, in the car, with the engine off. But standing there, I did the only thing 30 years of noticing had trained me to do. I started looking. I took out my phone, and I photographed it. The window, with the sun on the empty floor beside her, the paper gown, the black plant, and the cracked ring of soil. The number on the door, 214, brass and a little crooked, the cold tray. I didn't know yet what any of it would be worth. I only knew that a thing you can prove is different from a thing you only feel, and I was done only feeling. I came to check on her. I stayed to take her back. The man arrived smelling of cologne and certainty. Mid-50s, good suit, a leather folder under one arm, and the kind of unhurried smile that has practiced being trustworthy in a mirror. He extended his hand before I'd decided whether to take it. "Spencer Vance, I'm the director here." His handshake was warm and dry. "You must be relieved to finally see how well she's doing." I didn't answer that. He didn't need me to. He walked me back up the hall toward the lobby end, where the carpet got nice again, and showed me a memory care suite with a fresh duvet and a vase of silk flowers and a framed activity calendar, chair yoga, music therapy, a salon day, every Wednesday. He opened the leather folder and turned it to face me. A daily care log, clean columns, neat check marks. Bathing, assisted, daily. Grooming, daily. Physical therapy, 3 times weekly. Enrichment, daily. "Here at Camellia," he said, laying a hand briefly on my shoulder, "compassion isn't a service. It's who we are." I asked him why my grandmother was sitting in a paper gown in a room that smelled the way it smelled, with a dead plant on the sill, while this log said she'd been bathed that morning and walked the day before. The smile didn't move. "She has good days and bad days like all our guests. Dementia is hard on the families." He closed the folder. "What you're feeling right now, guilt, that's very normal." He walked me past a life enrichment board with a laminated weekly schedule and a glass case of crafts that looked bought, not made. A staffer in a polo appeared on cue, shook my hand, said what a joy Ruth was in music therapy. I asked when Ruth had last been to music therapy. The staffer's eyes flicked to Vance for half a second before she said, warmly, "Oh, she loves it." Which is not an answer to when. I'd asked a question with a date in it and gotten a feeling back. I was starting to notice that everyone here answered the question they wished you'd asked. I made it to my car before my hands started doing anything I couldn't control. I sat in the lot with the engine off and opened my phone because I needed to talk to my mother and my sister, needed them to be as horrified as I was, needed the version of my family where this was a mistake we'd fix together. The first thing the screen showed me was my sister's face. Whitney, tan, in sunglasses, a turquoise ocean behind her, and a glass with a little umbrella in her hand. The caption said, "Living our best life, and a tiny yellow sun where the period should be." Posted that morning. My mother had liked it within the hour, and under it she'd typed, "So proud of my girls. We earned this." Below that, scrolling back, my mother in Aspen at Christmas. The two of them on a balcony somewhere with mountains. A long lunch table, oysters, champagne. Her pension bought that infinity pool. I called my mother. She picked up on a beach somewhere, whined in the speaker. "Hazel, what a nice surprise. I'm at Camellia Reserve, Mom. I'm standing in the parking lot. Grandma's in a paper gown. The plant is dead. They have her down as having no family." A pause with surf in it. Then the smoothing. The same smoothing as always. "You always have to make everything about you. She's confused, hun. She pulls at her clothes, the staff told us. You drove all the way down there to get worked up over nothing." She didn't recognize me. That's the disease. You'd know that if you'd been around for any of the hard parts, instead of swooping in to be the hero. I called Whitney next. She answered annoyed, half laughing at someone off to the side. "Hazel, oh my God, Mom already texted me. You're being so dramatic." My ears went to a high, flat hum after the word dramatic, and through it I could hear the background of wherever she was, and a man's voice, low and amused, close to the phone, saying, "Babe, get this shot," before she pulled the phone away and hung up. I sat in the hot car and played her video again, with the sound up. 8 seconds. My sister laughing, the turquoise water, and then it. Low, close, male, easy. "Babe, get this shot." A man who was comfortable. A man who'd been there a while. I didn't know his face yet. I told myself it was nothing. A friend, a bartender, anyone. But the hand under my ribs that had ridden down with me from Valdosta closed a little tighter. Because I've spent my life reading what's underneath the surface of a thing, and the surface of my family had just stopped matching what was under it. When I was 9, my grandmother handed me a pair of pruning shears and a houseplant everyone else had thrown out. It was a sad, brown thing somebody had left to die on the curb, and she'd carried it home under her arm like a rescued cat. "Watch," she said. She turned it out of its pot, shook the dead soil off the roots, and showed me the secret. Down inside the dry tangle there was one root, still pale, still firm, still alive. She trimmed everything dead away. She cut the plant back so hard, I thought she'd killed it on purpose. Then she set the shears in my hand and folded my fingers around them. Dead isn't always dead, baby. Sometimes it just needs someone to notice. It came back. Of course it came back. By August, it had 3 new leaves, and I have spent the 30-some years since then building an entire life out of that one afternoon. A shop, a trade, a way of looking at the world, where a thing is only gone when you decide to stop looking at it. She was like that with people, too. She was the one who noticed when my mother's first marriage was failing before my mother would say it out loud. The one who noticed the year I stopped eating much and didn't make a thing of it, just started leaving a plate. She ran a little backyard nursery out of coffee cans and feed buckets and sold cuttings to the neighborhood for whatever people could pay, and they came to her porch with their dying ferns and their grief, and she fixed what she could of both. My grandfather used to say she could keep anything alive but a quiet afternoon. When he died, the quiet is the thing that finally got to her. She taught me to notice, so I did. What I hadn't noticed, because they made sure I couldn't, was how my grandmother ended up in that room. The decline had been real. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. Ruth started losing words, then losing afternoons. A doctor saw her 2 summers ago and scored her a 19 on one of those memory tests, slipping but still herself. Still able to tell you a story about your grandfather and get every detail right. By the fall, she was worse. And somewhere in there, my Uncle Roy, my mother's older brother, the one who'd held her power of attorney since a quiet afternoon at a lawyer's office years before any of this, decided with my mother that Ruth couldn't be alone anymore. They moved her this past January. I found out it was happening from a group text after the deposit was already paid. The text had a photo of her new room, the staged one, the silk flowers, the duvet, and a line from my mother. All settled. She's going to thrive here. 3 of my cousins replied with hearts. I called my mother that night and asked why no one had talked to me first, and she said, in the patient voice you use on a child, that it had all happened fast and there hadn't been time, and besides, I had the shop. I was busy. They hadn't wanted to burden me. Burden. The same word my grandmother would use about herself in that paper gown. I offered to drive down that first weekend to see her settled. My mother said the staff recommended no visitors for the first month to help her adjust. I believed it. Of course I believed it. Why would a nursing home lie about wanting you to visit? When I called Roy to ask how I could help, he had the tone of a man already late for something else. We've handled it, Hazel. When I called the facility to ask about the contract, a smooth voice, I know now it was Vance, got on the line and told me kindly, "You don't need to worry about the financial side. Leave the paperwork to me." And my mother, when I pushed, said the thing that finally closed the door. "Roy's handling all the paperwork with the nice man at the reserve. You just keep doing your flowers." I'd heard it coming, if I'm honest, in the only window they left me, the phone. Over that last year, her calls had gotten shorter and stranger. She'd ask the same question twice in 10 minutes. She'd call me by my mother's name, then catch herself and laugh it off. Once she called me at the shop, frightened, certain she'd left the stove on in a house she hadn't lived in for years, and I talked her down, and then sat in the back room shaking. I told my mother, "She's fine, hun. The doctor's on it. Stop hovering." So I stopped. I had a business to run and a family telling me, in 100 small ways, that this wasn't mine to carry. The distance they'd built between me and my grandmother turned out to be the exact distance a person needs to do something to someone and not be seen doing it. I let them handle it. That was my mistake. I let it go because I'd been trained to. At every family dinner where Grandma's care came up, I'd offer to help and get the same soft wall. I remember one dinner, maybe a year before the move, when I'd pushed, really pushed, about whether Grandma should still be living alone. The table went quiet. Roy studied his plate. And my mother put her fork down, looked at me with something almost like pity, and said, "It's family business, Hazel, and you're you." The little laugh after it, Whitney smiled into her wine. I let it go because the cost of not letting it go was always higher than the cost of swallowing it, and I'd been doing that math my whole life. So I didn't ask the next question, the only one that mattered. Who, exactly, is watching the money? My grandfather Walter died the year the world felt like it tilted, and he left Ruth a pension and a house. A small block house he'd bought when my mother was a baby and paid off with overtime, free and clear. His whole working life poured into it. He'd done everything right. He'd worked the overtime, paid the house off, left his wife enough to reach the end with her dignity intact. He just trusted the wrong people to honor it. You can build the wall. You can't make people guard the gate. They didn't put her away. They cashed her in. The clerk at the county recorder's office slid a stack of warm printouts across the counter, still holding the heat of the machine, and said, "It's all public record, hun. Help yourself." By the end of that first week, I'd done 2 things. I'd gotten my grandmother a real breakfast and a witness, which I'll come back to, and I'd hired an elder law attorney, a brisk woman named Gloria, who in my name had already filed a report with Adult Protective Services, petitioned the court for an emergency guardianship to override my uncle's power of attorney, and ordered an independent evaluation of Ruth's capacity. None of it would move fast. Courts keep their own clock, and my uncle's signature was on a document that said he spoke for her. So while the slow machinery turned, I read paper. The lawyer's pen stopped on the 3rd page. She flipped back, then forward, then tapped a line with a yellow highlighter. "There's a HECM recorded on the property," she said. "October, the fall before they moved her in." "A what?" "A reverse mortgage. Somebody borrowed against the house." She looked up at me. "When did your grandfather pay this off?" "Back in the 90s. It's been free and clear my whole adult life. A paid-off house doesn't grow a mortgage by itself." I called my Uncle Roy from the parking lot of the recorder's office. I kept my voice level. I told him I'd found a reverse mortgage on Grandma's house, dated last October, and asked him to explain it. There was a silence with the television in it. Then he came in fast and defensive. "That was to cover her care, Hazel. These places aren't cheap. You'd know that if you'd helped." I asked who had walked her through, signing it. An 87-year-old woman with a dementia diagnosis. "She was fine that day," he said. "She knew what she was doing." I asked how he could possibly know that. He said, "The man from the reserve handled it, and then he said he had to go, and he hung up." And the click of it told me more than anything he'd said. He hadn't asked how she was, not once. Not how she looked, not whether she was eating. He'd defended a mortgage and forgotten to ask about his own mother. I wrote down the date and time of that call in the notebook where I was keeping everything now. Not because I was angry. Because I was building something, and every brick counts. The lawyer cleared a space on the table and started laying pages out like a hand of cards, and she walked me through the money in a low, even voice. Ruth's income, every month, was a pension and a Social Security check. Together, $5,750. That money went into Ruth's own bank account, the account my Uncle Roy controlled with his power of attorney. The actual cost of the bare, neglected bed she was lying in, the real rate, the one the facility charged behind the brochure, was about $2,800 a month. $5,750 in, the lawyer said. She set down the bank summary. $2,800 of care out. She set down the facility's real rate sheet beside it. "Where's the rest going, Hazel?" The numbers smeared for a second, and my pulse moved up into my ears. The 5-star rate Vance had quoted me, the $6,400 a month, the premium memory care number. That was the marketing price, the figure on the glossy log, the story they told the outside world about where the money went. But Roy was paying the cheap rate. The difference, every month, was being lifted straight out of a dementia patient's account. And the house Walter built had been drained of $185,000 in a reverse mortgage, $90,000 of which had gone straight back to Camellia Reserve as a life care entrance fee the month she moved in. "This isn't neglect," the lawyer said quietly. "It's extraction." She slid the last document out from the bottom of the stack, the reverse mortgage closing package. She turned it to the signature page and put one finger beside the line. It was my grandmother's signature. I'd know it anywhere, the long, looping C, the way she crossed her T's high. Except this wasn't that. This was a broken, crawling version of it, the letters drifting downhill. 2 of them doubled where the pen had stopped and started, a signature made by a hand that didn't know where the line was. And the date beside it was October, 1 month after a neuropsychologist had written a 14 out of 30 in her file and the word moderate next to it. She couldn't have understood this, I said. She didn't know what she was signing. The lawyer capped her highlighter. If she lacked capacity that day, she said. "This signature is worth nothing. It's voidable, but somebody coached her through it anyway." "Reverse mortgages require counseling," she went on. "A HUD session on the record, where someone is supposed to make sure the borrower understands. There'll be a certificate in the file with her name on it." She found it, held it up. A box checked that said, "The borrower demonstrated understanding," dated the same week as the broken signature. "Either that counselor never really talked to her," she said, "or they talked to her and checked the box anyway. We'll find out which." Somewhere in a folder, there was a person who'd certified that my grandmother understood a thing she could not understand. That person had a name, too. Her hand shook on every letter. Before we go further, if you think you already know whose name is on that mortgage, drop your guess below. I promise you're only half right. And if you've ever been the family member nobody put on the paperwork, the one they told didn't need to worry, you already understand what I did next. There was a warm washcloth folded over the edge of the sink when I came back the next morning, and a real plate on the rolling table. Scrambled eggs, a cut orange, toast with the crusts off the way Ruth had always cut mine. None of it was on any official menu. A young woman in scrubs was standing behind my grandmother's chair with a comb, working a part into that matted hair, gentle and patient, talking to her the whole time in a low voice. She startled when she saw me, then steadied. Her name tag said Camilla. "She likes it off her face," Camilla said, a little defensive, like she expected to be scolded. "I do it when no one's looking." "You did this? The breakfast too?" She shrugged like it was nothing, which is how the bravest people always do it. She'd plugged in an old flip-style phone on the nightstand, Ruth's own phone, and the little screen glowed with a charge. "I keep it charged for her," she said, catching me looking. "She likes to see his face, her husband. There's pictures on it." She tucked the comb away, then she stepped close enough that the words were only for me, and her eyes went to the door. "Ask them for the daily care logs," she said. "Not the ones the director shows. The real ones, the aides signed too." And she turned away and went back to being invisible, because in that building being seen helping was dangerous. Someone in that building still saw her. Camilla had been there longer than most of the staff, she told me later, in pieces. The aides were stretched 3 to a hall on a good day. Residents who had family that visited got bathed. Residents who didn't, because no one was checking. She'd started bringing Ruth real food out of her own lunch months ago, when she realized the woman in 214 was getting trays she couldn't open, and no one was coming to open them. "She told me about her garden," Camilla said. "On her good days. The flowers. I figured anybody who loves something that much shouldn't have to eat alone." I pulled the vinyl chair around, so I was sitting knee to knee with my grandmother, into the light this time, and I put a fresh gardenia in her hands. I'd bought a potted one in town because I couldn't stand the dead one on the sill. Her fingers found the bloom. Something shifted behind her eyes. "Gardenia," she said. "Your grandfather's favorite." She smiled, and for one whole minute, she was entirely there, looking at me, knowing me. For that minute, she asked about the shop. Was I still on the corner by the bakery? Did I still do the Henderson's anniversary lilies every June? Details she shouldn't have had, and did. She told me my grandfather used to bring her gardenias for no occasion at all, just because, and that the smell still made her feel like a girl. She laughed, and it was her laugh, the real one. And I held on to the arms of the chair, because for 1 minute I had her back, and I knew exactly how much I'd been missing, and how little of it was left. Then her face changed, and her chin started to go. "I'm sorry I'm such a burden, baby. I'm so sorry. I try not to be." I pressed my forehead down against the back of her hand and held it there, and couldn't say anything at all for a while. When I came up, she was drifting again, but she caught my sleeve. "I called your mother," she said, vague and urgent at once. "So many times. The phone just rings." Her eyes searched the middle distance. "I made a little message. For whoever came. Did you get my message?" She named the flower. She was still in there. I took the pruning scissors out of my bag. I carry them. I'm a florist. And I cut a single living sprig off the black, dead gardenia on the sill. Down low where I gambled, there might still be one pale stem. I stripped the bottom leaves and stood it in a clean water glass and set it where she could see it. "Dead isn't always dead," I told her. Camilla watched me do it from the doorway. "You'd be surprised," she said quietly, "how many families just stop coming. They sign the papers and then one day they don't come anymore, and nobody asks." She looked at Ruth. "She used to wait by the door." We stopped letting her. She'd fall. I asked Camilla how she stood it, watching it happen, every haul, every day. She didn't answer for a moment. She straightened the blanket over my grandmother's knees. "I tell myself, the ones with somebody coming will be okay," she said. "You're somebody coming." Then she said the thing that decided the next 3 weeks for me, almost to herself. "You'd be surprised how many families just stop coming." I looked at the cutting, standing in its glass on the sill, one green stem off a dead plant, and I made her a promise out loud, which I don't do lightly. I told her I was getting my grandmother out of there, and I was taking the whole thing down on my way. I put a living thing back on her sill. A woman was leaning against my car in the parking lot when I came out that evening, arms crossed against the heat, a manila envelope held flat against her chest. Expensive watch. Tired eyes. She didn't introduce herself like a stranger. She said it like an accusation she was tired of carrying. "You're the granddaughter." Not a question. "Who are you?" "Diane Vance." She let that land. The director's wife. She pushed the envelope at me, thick, doubled over, and creased like it had been carried around for a while. "Don't open it here," she said, glancing at the building. "And don't trust the logs they gave you. The pretty ones." I asked her how she knew which logs they'd given me. She almost smiled. "Because it's the same folder every time. The leather one. He's been showing families that exact folder for years." She was already moving away. "There's a diner on Route 9. Tomorrow, 8. Come alone and bring away to make copies." She'd thought about this. She'd thought about it for a long time. His own wife handed me the envelope. I opened it in my motel room with the chain on the door. Inside were photocopies. The aide's real daily logs. The second set Camilla had mentioned, in cramped handwriting that didn't match the director's clean columns at all. Bathing. Refused, no follow-up. Refused, no follow-up. Skipped, short staff, page after page of a different woman's life than the one Vance had sold me in his leather folder. And behind the logs, a ledger, photocopied account pages, and a typed list. A column of names, residents, with dates beside them running back 4 years. I counted, at least 11. She was waiting in a corner booth the next morning with coffee. She wasn't drinking. She slid the ledger copy across the formica and put one finger on the column of names. "I kept copies," Diane said, "for years. I told myself I was keeping them in case." She didn't say in case of what. You want to know the worst part? You're not the first daughter to come asking. You're the 4th in 4 years. The others? He wore them down, or scared them, or paid the family to make them go quiet. And they stopped coming. Her jaw tightened. "I just never gave one of you proof before." She'd been a bookkeeper before she married him. "That's how it started," she said. She did the early books, back when it was one building and a dream, and by the time she understood what the numbers were really doing, she was the wife of the man doing it, and that's a hard thing to walk out of with your name clean. So she'd done the only thing she could think of. she copied. Every quarter, for years, she took home a shadow set of the real numbers and put them in a box, telling herself it was insurance, telling herself she'd never use it. 3 women came before you, she said. I watched him handle everyone. I told myself it wasn't my business. She wrapped both hands around the cold cup. I'm making it my business. Most of those 11 families, she told me, never knew. They trusted. They got a glossy log and a good story, same as I almost did. And their mother or their father got the cheap bed and the marketing price. And the difference went where the difference goes. A few families, Vance cut in. He found the ones with a relative who held the purse strings and a conscience he could buy, and he made them partners instead of victims. One of the names near the top of her list had a small star penciled beside it. I asked what the star meant. That one died here, she said, 18 months ago. The family never knew the house was gone until the lawyers came. She didn't say anything else about it. She didn't have to. 11 families. Same playbook. 4 years. Why now? I asked. Why me? Diane turned her coffee cup in a slow circle. Then she took out her phone, found a photo, and laid it on the table facing me. A man at a resort bar, laughing, his hand on a woman's back. The man was her husband. The woman was my sister. That laugh in her video? Diane said. That's my husband. She didn't look at the photo. She'd clearly looked at it enough. He's done it before. The wives, the daughters. He finds the family member who can make things difficult, and he makes her feel like the most seen woman in the world. Her voice didn't shake. It had gone past shaking a long time ago. Your sister thinks it's love. It's leverage. He's keeping your family sweet, so nobody looks at the books. I sat with that. My sister, who had everything I was told I lacked, had been chosen the way a mark is chosen, for her usefulness, for the access she gave him to a quiet, compliant family, and a grandmother nobody was watching. She thought she'd finally been seen. She'd been selected, and the cruelest part, the part I kept turning over on the drive back, was that I couldn't even hate her cleanly for it, because I know exactly what it feels like to be the one in your family nobody really looks at, and then to have a stranger look at you like you matter. He'd found the same loneliness in her that they'd built in me. He'd just put it to work. The cold went up both my arms as I matched that laugh on the table to the smooth voice in the leather folder office. My sister was bait and didn't know it. Now I had everything. The question was where to set it off. There was a glossy invitation on my motel desk. Camilla had slipped it to me, lifted from the staff break room. Heavy cardstock, gold foil, the Camellia Reserve 5-star anniversary, an open house, Saturday, with press and prospective families invited to tour, the gold standard in compassionate senior living. I had 2 clocks running, and I want to be clear about both, because I will not pretend I left my grandmother in that room for a show. The first clock was hers, and it had been running since day 1. Gloria, my lawyer, had already filed everything: the APS report, the emergency guardianship petition, the request for a court-ordered capacity evaluation. A geriatric specialist saw Ruth that week and scored her a 13, and put in writing that she could not safely manage her own affairs and had not been able to for some time. But you cannot pull a woman out of a facility overnight when her own son holds a power of attorney and swears she's fine. It takes a hearing. It takes a judge. So while that clock ticked, Camilla kept her fed and clean, and I came every single day. And Ruth was as safe as I could make her inside that building. The second clock was everyone else's. The 11 families, the ones who'd come next. And the house, which the reverse mortgage was quietly choking, because when a borrower leaves the home for good, the loan comes due, and Roy had already quietly, listed Walter's house for sale to cover it. I could move my grandmother in a courtroom. But the only place I could stop the rest of it, all at once, in front of witnesses, was the one stage Vance was about to build for himself. Gloria had pulled the file on the place before. "We've had complaints about Camellia Reserve before," she told me, flat. "Nothing ever stuck. He's careful, and the families who testify always backed out." I asked her why they backed out. She ticked it off without looking up from the file. Some got scared. A facility can make a guardianship fight ugly, can paint the difficult relative as unstable, can run the clock until the resident dies, and the question is moot. Some got bought, a quiet check and a quieter signature, and some just couldn't bear to keep walking into that building, so they told themselves the place was fine, and they stopped coming. "He doesn't beat these cases," Gloria said. "He outlasts them." She finally looked up. "So don't give him time. Give him a room full of cameras." She looked at the invitation in my hand. "We can request an emergency capacity evaluation and a wellness check. Fast, but a public record that can't be quietly buried? That's different." So I did the hardest thing, which was nothing. For 2 weeks I went quiet. I stopped calling the director's office. I stopped sending the pointed emails. I let Spencer Vance believe I was the fourth daughter, the one who'd run out of fight, the one about to stop coming like all the others. I let him relax. He had seen petitions before. They never stuck, and a difficult daughter who suddenly stopped calling looked to him like one more who was about to back out. The whole time I was meeting Gloria at night, walking the ombudsman through the ledger and calling a reporter who covered elder care for the regional paper, who said yes, she'd be at the open house, and yes, she'd save me a minute on the floor if I needed it. I built a kit, a folder for me, and a second folder I left with Gloria in case Vance's people took mine at the door. The same pages, twice, because I'd learned by then that you never bring the only copy into the room. I wrote out, on an index card, the order I'd say things, so that even if my hands shook, my mouth wouldn't lose its place. Log, then log, mortgage, then evaluation, ledger, the phone last. I practiced it in the motel mirror until it came out flat and certain, the way you read someone their rights. Then I called my mother, and I made my voice warm. "Mom, you should be there Saturday, at the anniversary thing. Bring Whitney. Wear something nice. There'll be photos." "Oh, Hazel." She sounded delighted, vindicated. "Of course, hun. It's so good to finally see you being supportive." I invited them to their own reckoning. The night before, I drove over for evening visiting hours and sat with my grandmother and smoothed her hair back the way Camilla had taught me. "Tomorrow, Grandma," I whispered. "We finish this tomorrow." I packed the truth like a bouquet. The ballroom had a string trio and a champagne tower and a banner 2 stories tall that read, "Celebrating 5 years of 5-star care." There were prospective families in their good clothes being walked through by staff. There was the reporter near the back with a recorder in her bag. There was my mother in a blue dress, glowing, and my sister beside her. And there was Spencer Vance at a podium under the banner with a glass of champagne and that practiced, trustworthy smile telling a room full of strangers about his life's calling. They'd dressed it like a wedding. Waiters with trays, a slideshow looping against the far wall, sunlit residents in a watercolor class, a birthday cake, none of them anyone I'd seen on the 214 hall. A cluster of prospective families moved through in their good clothes, nodding while a staffer gestured up at the chandelier like it proved something. Under that staffer's arm was a leather folder. The same leather folder. They were showing it to the next families right there, in real time, while my grandmother sat 20 minutes away with a dead plant and a tray she couldn't open. My mother had found a spot near the front where the photographer would catch her, and when she saw me, she lifted 2 fingers and mouthed, "You came." 4 years of 5-star compassionate care, Vance was saying, because to us, every resident is family. He'd watched me go silent for 2 weeks. He thought I was gone. So when he opened the floor, I'd love to hear from one of our families. He was looking for a glowing testimonial in front of the press, and his eyes passed over my mother, and then they found me near the front, and some old instinct to perform generosity took over. He smiled and lifted a hand. "Come up, dear," he said. "Tell everyone what we've meant to your family." I walked up. My mother beamed. I took the microphone, and the metal of it was cold, and my heart was slow, and I let the room go quiet for 1 full second before I spoke. He handed me the microphone himself. "My grandmother is Ruth Calloway," I said. "Room 214. I want to read you 2 things." I held up the first page. This is her care log, the one the director shows. Bathe daily. Salon every Wednesday. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Enrichment daily. I let them hear how nice it sounded. That's what they billed. I held up the second page beside it. This is the log the aides actually sign. Bath refused, no follow-up. Refused, skipped, short staff. 3 weeks ago, I drove 9 hours and found her in a paper gown, unwashed, alone, beside a plant that died because no one watered it. My voice stayed flat and even. Here's what actually happened. Vance was still smiling, but he'd set his glass down. "These are fabrications," he said smoothly to the room, not to me. "By a disgruntled relative. Dementia is very hard on families." A murmur moved through the room, the particular sound a crowd makes when it starts to suspect it's on the wrong side of something. The reporter near the back had stopped pretending to look at her phone. A few of the prospective families had gone still, their tour smiles fading. Vance laughed, a short, tight version of the warm laugh, and glanced toward the doors for staff. "This is a private event," he said. "Someone—" But no one moved to take the microphone from me because 30 people were watching. And you cannot drag a woman away from a microphone in front of cameras and still be the gold standard in compassionate care. "I have the originals," I said. "The aides will say whose handwriting this is." 2 logs. 1 truth. His handwriting on both. I didn't raise my voice. I reached into the folder. This is a reverse mortgage on her house. I held it up. She signed it in October. I held up the second sheet. This is the doctor's evaluation from 1 month before. A 14 out of 30. Moderate dementia. I looked at him. Perfectly legal. That's the phrase, isn't it? The one you used on the phone. The smile cracked. That's not... His hand moved on the podium, found nothing. Reached for the water glass and missed the first time. "Who let her in here? Where is—" He looked toward the back of the room for security. For his wife. For anyone. "This is a private event." The smooth man ran out of smooth. I held up the ledger. 11 residents, I said. 4 years. I set it on the podium where the reporter could see it. Then I took out my grandmother's old phone, the one Camilla kept charged so an 88-year-old woman could look at her dead husband's face. I had found the message that morning. I turned the volume all the way up and held the little speaker to the microphone, and I slowed down because some voices you do not rush. In the quiet of that ballroom, under the 2-story banner about family, my grandmother's voice came out small and clear and steady. A thing she had recorded alone in a paper gown on a day when the fog lifted just long enough for her to be afraid. "It's Ruth. If somebody finds this, I'm not sick the way they say. I know where I am. I want to go home. Please, take me home. I'm not sick." Nobody in the room moved. I let it sit. Then I held up the call log, the long scroll of it, and I turned to my mother. And I did not call her Mom. "She called you 31 times, Brenda." The first name landed in the room like a dropped plate. "Not Mom." "Brenda. You stopped earning Mom the day you let it ring. I held the screen out so the dates showed. 31 calls. You answered none of them. And you posted a photo from a beach the same afternoon, paid for out of her account. My mother's face came apart. She was confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. Whitney was staring at the ledger, then at Vance, then at the photo I'd laid beside it, without a word. The resort bar, his hand on her back. The color went out of her. You told me she was happy, Whitney said. Not to me, to him. You told me she was in the best place. You said... Her voice broke off. A woman stepped out of the crowd near the press, calm, holding a state ID badge up where the cameras could see it. Gloria had brought the ombudsman, and the ombudsman had brought the weight of an open file. Mr. Vance, she said, this facility is now under state review. I'd ask you not to leave. The room went silent. Then it turned on them. The photographer's flash went off, then another, on instinct. My mother was saying my name, then Grandma's, then nothing that held together. My Uncle Roy wasn't there. He'd been smart enough to stay home, and watching that room, I understood his absence was its own kind of answer. Whitney stood up. She didn't look at me, and she didn't look at our mother. She crossed the floor to Spencer Vance, and whatever was on her face emptied the last of the color out of his. She didn't shout. She just looked at him until he looked away. Then she walked out of the ballroom alone, and that was the first true thing my sister had done in a year. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't have to. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves, I see you. You don't owe quiet to the people who counted on your silence. Tell me one boundary you are done apologizing for, down in the comments, and subscribe to stay for the part nobody at that party expected. 2 days later, I wheeled my grandmother out the front doors of Camellia Reserve myself, past the orchids and the fountain and the wall of smiling staff photos, with a water glass on her lap, holding one gardenia cutting that had, that very week, pushed out a new white root. The court had granted an emergency temporary guardianship on a Monday morning. My uncle's power of attorney was suspended the same hour. A judge does not need long, it turns out, once there's a doctor's evaluation and a recording and a ledger on the table. I had the order in my bag. No one from administration walked us out. Vance wasn't there. The young woman at the desk who'd told me Ruth had no family wouldn't look up. The automatic doors opened and the Florida heat rolled over us, thick and bright, and my grandmother lifted her face into it the way the dead gardenia never got to, and her eyes closed. "Is it spring out here, baby?" she asked. I told her it was. She felt the sun for the first time in months. The rest came, not like a movie, slower and more bureaucratic and, in the end, more complete. The day after the gala, the state opened a formal investigation. Within the week, the Attorney General's Medicaid fraud unit had the ledger and the 11 names and was pulling 4 years of records. The facility's license was suspended. The reverse mortgage went into rescission on the grounds my lawyer had flagged in that first warm stack of paper, a signature from a woman who lacked the capacity to give it, and the forced sale of my grandfather's house was stopped cold. The story ran in the regional paper. Then it ran everywhere, because a recording of an 88-year-old woman saying, "Take me home," does something to people. A spreadsheet can't. Other families started calling the reporter. There's a group now, adult children, a couple of spouses, people who got the glossy folder and the good story and trusted it, the way I almost did. They meet on a video call once a month. Some are deep in the part that happens in courtrooms. Some are just learning what a HECM is at a county counter with warm paper in their hands. I don't run it. I just answer when they call. Usually at night, usually some version of the same question. How did you know to look? And I tell them the truth. I didn't know. I just couldn't stop looking once a thing stopped adding up. My Uncle Roy is dealing with the part of this that happens in courtrooms. My mother is dealing with the part that happens at the country club, where the photos she was so proud of mean something different now to everyone who sees them, and where being proud of my girls reads, in hindsight, like a confession. My phone buzzed on the kitchen table one night, weeks in. Whitney. I didn't open it right away. When I did, it said, I didn't know about the house. I didn't know about the money. I swear to you, I didn't know. And then, a minute later, can I help with Grandma? Can I see her? Whitney was a fool and a coward, and she let a man use her to keep my grandmother quiet. And she also, I believe, did not know. Both of those are true. So I wrote back the only honest thing. You can earn your way back to her. Slowly. The system finished what one daughter started. My grandmother lives 20 minutes from me now, in a small, bright room I can get to before breakfast. The windowsill faces east, and it is crowded. Gardenias I've rooted and repotted, one after another, the original cutting and its children, white blooms, and that heavy, sweet smell filling the whole room. So the first thing you notice walking in is that something alive is happening in here. She has her own things again. Her wedding photo on the nightstand, an Afghan a stranger from the group knit for her, the original cutting now grown tall enough to lean against the glass. The home she's in costs less than Camellia Reserve and does 10 times more, and her pension pays for it, the way it was always supposed to. Some mornings she knows me completely. Some mornings she doesn't. On the good ones, she takes my hand in both of hers, the way she used to take my muddy fingers, and she looks at the flowers, and then at me. You always noticed, baby, she said one morning, even when you were little, you always noticed. I'm not the disappointment, the afterthought, or the girl who plays with flowers. I'm the one who drove 9 hours, the one who noticed, the one who came. You don't get your worth back by winning anyone's approval. You take it back the day you stop asking for it. So if there is someone only you still see, someone the rest of them have quietly agreed to stop looking at, go. Notice them in time. You do not need anyone's permission to be the one who came. They put her by a window to forget her. Now her window blooms.